How were you navigating yourself through this? Yes,
Me.
personally,
Ah,
this change expectations as you're going from private to a public sector.
I see. Sorry, I think I completely missed that question. The first, Vishal, the first thing I'm going to say is I don't think I could have ever come to this position any sooner than I did. And the reason why I say that is if you know the Enneagram, which for me is the greatest GPS system for understanding self and others, I am hardwired, like genetically coded to sense, see, feel needs.
Hmm.
And in a community where everyone has needs and they believe you should meet all of them because it's a democracy, I would have discombobulated my first week because there's more demand than I have capacity personally or on my team to meet. So had I not done so much development about discernment, I would have become overwhelmed. And even then, Vishal, I still did deeper development because I thought, I don't know if I can keep going when there's more than I've ever had to do before. And
Hmm.
I went to Meg Wheatley's program, Warrior for the Human Spirit, which gave me great development on how to be present to demand and not get lost. And I think I learned that in the private sector, but I feel as if what's happening here is so new and so fresh. But I'm so grateful that I had been more conscious and actively developing myself to be in a role like this. The other thing I'm going to tell you is that when I first got here, I said, I think I kind of like monarchies more than
Hmm.
democracies because in the private sector, we could declare and we could discern, like, we're not going to go the low end of the market because we don't have enough
Hmm.
engineers to work on that software code. Here, you don't get to always make that kind of choice as much as we do discern. Um, and I am just so grateful that the private sector instincts of discernment helped me, come into this. But the monarchy part was, uh, it is demanded and it is almost a moral obligation to engage more people in what it is you're going to do. So I have had to really rethink how many people do you ask for their inputs before you
Hmm.
make a decision? And so that's why I said the monarchy,
Hmm.
my last CEO at Agilent, we could just declare stuff.
Hmm.
Um, here, you you just cannot, nor should you.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was a real adjustment. I was like, well, can't we just decide and make it happen? No, that's not the nature of democracy.
Interesting. And on that note, how would you influence such systems? So you are
Influence?
yes. So
Hmm.
you're coming from a obviously as you rightly pointed out, you can influence pretty quickly. Your CEO is on board. You are on board. Let's meet, rubber meets the road and just keep things going. Now
Sure.
with something like City, it's as rightly pointed out, it's age old system is well built. It takes time. Now
Yeah.
you want certain changes. Like how would you go about influencing such a system? Like what are some of your hacks if you can share?
Yeah. So that question pulls two thoughts for me. The first one, Vishal, that I think is part of my genetic code and it was enhanced working where I did all these years is I look for what's the opportunity or performance gap. So I took time to understand, just like I did at every company I ever worked at or consulted for, what are they trying to turn out? Like, what's the business of the organization? Because I always tell people I'm first and foremost a business executive, and then I happen to be in HR. So
Hmm.
when you understand your customer, and in this case, the customer's customer, the community, and you line up what you are offering, it's impossible for people not to want it. The second thing is I looked at our city council as a board of directors because that was my experience from the private sector. And I started talking to the mayor about talent and how were they leading their talent, which are the three council appointed employees, the city manager, city attorney, chief judge. And we ended up creating an ad hoc committee of the council where 3 members served. And we now have a new section in the council resource guide called Leading Talent. So it was through series of conversations, asking questions, and then seeing how that could hook into a natural process in the city, which was an ad hoc committee of the council. It's been a 2-year journey, and it was very rewarding to have them start to say, yeah, how we lead our people, the talent that they hire and retain matters greatly. So Vishal, that was a very rich and rewarding part. And I don't know that I thought I was influencing as much as I thought the center of everything is your talent.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And I wonder if you look at your peers from say other cities and other public sectors, what are some of the common or what are some of the pitfalls that you see that other leaders are not doing that they should in other cities who are not probably managing as well as your city is? Like, what have you ever given any thought on that? On those
Well,
points?
Vishal, I actually every 2 weeks was invited to a group of major city, like I'm talking Denver, major cities, Los Angeles, my peers, to talk about response to COVID. And Vishal, I have to tell you, some of them are doing remarkable, innovative work. And then locally, I get together with other public sector peers. And again, I'm deeply inspired by what I see and dispelling the myth that public sector cannot do some of the creative things that we did in the private sector. I don't know because I just don't know how many cities are as well run as Fort Collins. We were a Malcolm Baldrige recipient in 2017. I think we were the second municipality in the country that ever got that award. And we have many cities come to find out, well, what's the secret sauce? And I really credit, many people, but I think having a leader as phenomenal as Darren Atterbury has made a huge difference. So
Okay.
I think public sector is a lot cooler than people think.
Fair point. So, tell me about your inspirational leader. I think so, leader that has inspired you, and walk us through what are those traits or what are those aspects that has really inspired you. That if you can walk us through that.
Yeah. So Vishal, many people inspire me. I mean, I read historical biographies and I'm inspired by Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King. I mean, so there's many that you read and know the effects of their leadership, but I'm going to talk near term. And I have one person from the private sector and one person from the public. So Bill Sullivan, who is the CEO of Agilent Technologies, was the first line manager I ever worked with in 1981. I was his personnel liaison for a 3-shift manufacturing department that he ran. And I want to tell through the lens of the Enneagram, which I didn't know when I was working with Bill. He walks in the pattern of the 8, which is the action orientation, and I walk in the pattern of the 2, which is a heart center. I saw that he had a big heart, and he saw that I was a kick-ass, get stuff done person. And I learned so much from Bill. He has a humility that is unbelievable. He is a curious learner, and he has a lot of wisdom. So when he asked me to come back to Agilent and he eventually became the CEO, he transformed the company. Agilent, when it split from HP, was at that time, the biggest IPO because it was, sold as a new publicly traded company. And then the dot-com bust happened, and Agilent went through 9 quarters of consecutive loss. I mean, telling the street we didn't make our numbers again 9 quarters. Bill, when he was identified as the CEO after a search by the board, said, we're going to go back to our basic competency and measurement. And he transformed the company. And he said, Teresa, it's as if we're starting it all over again. And what I loved about Bill is he would choose a theme, embed it, and then go to the next. So, I mean, I could write volumes about that time. Bill was willing to listen to people. He knew when a decision needed to be made. And he taught me one of the things. He said, Teresa, the worst thing you could do is waste people's time as a leader. And sometimes waiting to make a decision is as bad as no decision. So he said there's 2 parts to decision making. You make the best decision on data and intuition, but then you see if it was okay. And if it's not, then make the second one to adjust it. That taught me a lot. And so Bill was an inspirational leader of mine. In the public sector, the person I've already mentioned twice is Darren Atterbury. To stay in the game of serving a community and going through a number of different mayors and elected officials that serve on council, he reminds me of that great article that I think the author was Bob Nadler, Nadler. That's my recall. And it was called The CEO's Second Act. And it was a brilliant article that a lot of CEOs that start up an organization aren't the ones to help it mature. Or, if they go through an acquisition, and very few CEOs can do a second act. The ones that did were the ones that are willing to learn. And I think Darren Atterbury has a second act, a third act, a fourth act, because every time we have elections, it's a new council. And he has navigated that beautifully. And watching him has taught me a lot about how you make a bigger table for more people to be at it.
Interesting. And what is what is the role of a leader, of an HR leader, when it comes to, say, leading an organization through this transformative times? What do you say is walk us through that.
Well, Vishal, there's a lot of articles out there and a lot of webinars that are done on how the pandemic was the demand for CHROs or, chief people officers. It was a lot of reliance on those of us that talk about people strategies. And so I think some of the things I've said before, I'm always clear about what are we trying to accomplish to serve our community. And I am abundantly biased that the only way you can do any of that begins and ends with talent. And I constantly learn, how do we think about talent? How do you attract talent? How do you retain it? And things that I did in the 80s are not necessarily what needs to be done now. And so I am a curious, insane learner. And I read a lot, but more importantly, I connect to peers. And I still have so many relationships from the private sector, and now I have many in the public sector. So I don't assume that I know anything, but I do know how to go ask questions and find out, good resources.